Where are we? Good morning. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Committee, taking place from the Walton Suite in the Winchester Guildhall. It's Wednesday, the 13th of March 2024, and the time is just after 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter, and I am Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is Councillor Edwards, who is Vice Chair of the committee. Around the table, we have the other elected members of the committee, and we are supported today by a number of officers. We have Lorna Hutchings, who's the service lead of the Built Environment, Daniel Lucas, our legal advisor, case officer in the first case. For the first item will be Liz Young, but case officers change with each item, and Matthew Watson from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. Can I remind you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Please can I remind everyone to ensure your mobile phones and any other electronic devices are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please look at the handout provided on your chairs or on the information slides displayed as you walked in and during the breaks for further guidance about this meeting. To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, I ask that nobody calls out from the back of the room during the proceedings. In accordance with the public speaking protocols of the meeting, those who have registered to speak will be able to address the meeting for their allotted time. If there is any disruption of the proceedings and the committee is not respected, it may be necessary to temporarily adjourn the meeting. Finally, can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting? Those of you who have registered to speak, I will call you forward when it is your turn to make your contribution. Members of the committee may ask you questions of clarification, so please remain at the microphone until after members' questions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of your remaining time. So now we turn to the agenda. Okay, Matthew, do we have any apologies and deputy members, please?
Good morning, Chair, members. No apologies, and all members of the committee are present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will welcome Councillor Williams, who's just become a full member of the committee. Lovely. Disclosures of interest. Members, do we have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm the ward councillor for Badger Farm and Oliver's Battery, and we have a tree application.
I can't hear you, Councillor Laming. Can you just speak up more, please?
You don't usually complain that. No, I'm the ward councillor for Badger Farm and Oliver's Battery, and I should be speaking as a member of the public on the tree preservation order on item 13.
So you will step down during that item. Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I need to declare a personal but not prejudicial interest in items 6 and 11 due to my role as the ward council ward member. I've taken no part in any discussions regarding either of these applications and will therefore take part in the consideration of the items and vote thereon.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Need to declare a personal but not prejudicial interest in items 8 and 9 as the ward councillor. I have not taken part in any detailed discussions on the two planning applications. Yeah.
Thank you. We now turn to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of February 2024. Are those an accurate record of the meeting, please? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, we now we have an update sheet. Can I see members in favour of accepting the update sheet onto the agenda, please? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. We now turn to the first item on our agenda, item number 6, which is at Dunley Vicarage Lane in Woodmancote. And the officer presenting is Liz Young. So over to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to the change of use of a former annex to a self-contained dwelling. The plans also include proposals to carry out alterations and extensions to the existing building. So just going to the first slide, this is the location plan for the site. The site lies within Woodmancott, which is a rural settlement. It lies in open countryside. The overall size of the site amounts to approximately 700 square metres, and it includes part of the residential curtilage of Dunley, the main house, the application building, former annex, and a small area of agricultural land to the southeast. So the application building, as you can see, is linked to the main house, and it fronts onto its own parking area and access. This next slide shows the aerial view of the site, which is marked by the yellow star. The southeast and southwest boundaries are joined by open fields. It lies at the end of the row, a small row of residential properties. It's accessed from Vicarage Lane, which is a minor rural road to the north. This next slide shows the proposed site layout plan. So as mentioned, the building already has its own parking and access, and no changes are proposed to that. The applications indicated that the area of agricultural land to the southeast, so that's, well, smooth the cursor, this area here is to remain in agricultural use and will not form part of the garden to the proposed house. So the parts of the building identified in green are the bits that are to be removed. So that's the link to the main house and the two bay windows at the front. And the orange shading is the proposed extensions, which, as you can see, are going to the front and the rear. This next slide shows the existing and proposed front elevation. So the top image is as it is now. You can see the existing dormer, bay windows, and the link to the main house, which are to be removed. Bottom image is as proposed. So as you can see, there's two dormers going in, central front porch. The roof alterations would consist of the change from the hip to the full gabled roof and a very slight increase in ridge height. The facing materials would be render and clay tiles to match the main house. This next slide shows the existing and proposed west elevation. So this is the elevation that faces the main house. So the main change here is the removal of the link to the main house. So that's this area shaded in grey at the top. You can also see the proposed two-storey rear extension, which would be added. This shows the east elevation, which faces towards the open field. So the main change is the roof alterations here from a hipped roof to a gable, and also the two-storey rear extension. And this is the rear view, existing and proposed. So you can see the proposed two-storey and single-storey extension going on the rear elevation, and the removal of the link to the main house. This shows the existing and proposed ground floor. So again, the areas outlined in green show the parts of the building which are to be removed. This shows the existing and proposed first floor plan. So the existing building at the moment has a floor area of about 110 square metres, consists of one bedroom. As proposed, it would be about 155 square metres, 2 bedrooms overall. Just moving on to the site photos, this is the view as you approach the site from Vicarage Lane. You can just see the application building through the trees. This is the view through the access. So there's no changes proposed to the access. It will stay as it is. This is the view from the agricultural land which lies to the southeast, looking towards the application building and the main house. This is view just looking down the southeast boundary towards the rear of the site from the front parking area. This is the view from within the rear garden area looking towards the field boundary and with Vicarage Lane in the distance. And this is view looking back towards the boundary with the main house. The final photo just shows the view looking from the main house back towards the annex building. So that brings us to the end of the slides. Just to conclude, the recommendation is that planning permission should be refused. It's acknowledged there's a lot of local support for the proposal. However, it's considered that it would not meet the requirements of local plan policy MTRA 3, which sets out the criteria for new dwellings in Woodman Copse. So it's therefore concluded it would result in the unjustified introduction of a new dwelling into open countryside. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. We now move to public speaking. And our first public speaker is the Parish Council representative, Andrew Adams. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Adams. And you will have 3 minutes from when you start speaking, so no rush. Look it out. Thank you.
You hear me okay? Morning, Andrew Adams on behalf of Mitchell Devon Parish Council. We'd really just like to reiterate our support for the application further to our submitted comment. It's fair to say the applicants, Jane and Graham, have made very significant efforts to engage the community, both directly and through the Parish Council. It's fair to say there's been more supportive public comments on this application than I've ever seen for a single dwelling application. I think that shows the efforts that they've made in engaging and gaining support. Myself and another councillor visited, kind of shown around and explained what their proposals are for the property and the fairly modest extension. It's fair to say Woodmancote is a small but stable community, based primarily around the church and the farm. On that basis, we see, as we do in other settlements, the challenges of people finding property to downsize into. A significant challenge that we recognise in many of our communities, and especially so in Woodmancote. The property is well away from the settlement centre. There is no boundary, settlement boundary of Woodmancote. It's down a rural lane. It took me a little while to find it, and I'm on the parish council. But it's on that basis, it has a lot of support in offering an opportunity for people within the community to stay where they've spent many years, and the support is clear. Whilst not an expert, the basis for the application and the policy that's set out is to us seems sound. We unanimously agreed to support the application, and we would strongly encourage the committee to do the same. To provide this welcome opportunity for the community to provide housing for those who wish to stay, having spent many years living there, and the application is strongly supported across the community.
Thank you very much. If you could just wait a second, just in case members have questions of clarification for you. So members, do we have any questions for the Parish Council representative? Can I ask, how often does the Parish Council support a new house in your parish?
Routinely, most single dwelling applications would receive no comment. It would require a specific reason for us to actively support. So probably only a few times a year would those exist for an individual application. So on this basis, because of the engagement and the community support, we feel that we're reflecting.
So you would say it's very unusual?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Our next speakers are the ward councillors. I have Councillor Horrell and Councillor Godfrey, but I see we only have Councillor Godfrey here. No, I think it's yes, we're gilding the lily otherwise, Councillor Godfrey. Thank you. So
Thank you. I give my apologies to Councillor Horrell. She had to have a procedure yesterday and is not fit for general consumption today.
okay, thank you very much. Too much information. So Councillor Godfrey, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I oppose development in the countryside on principle. The destruction of green fields with buildings that do not absolutely need to be there is wrong. But the officer's report gives reasons for refusal, but it does not give the whole picture. MTRA 3 is a primary reason for refusal, as the proposal is not infilling in a continuously developed frontage. This reason is irrelevant, as the application site is not in Woodmancote, but over half a mile outside. There are only 2 homes in this small group of buildings, both previously occupied by those connected with Vicarage Farm. But now the remaining 2 couples in these homes both wish to move to smaller homes, but there are none available in the vicinity. This application seeks to change the use of a holiday cottage attached to Dunley into a small home to meet the local needs of to provide smaller homes for older local people. There is no substantial development proposed or needed, no change in character and no impact on the countryside. Refusal will not protect countryside nor improve its character, but would most likely damage the sustainability of this isolated community. The officer's report rejects the applicant's assertion that the NPPF allows for the creation of physically isolated homes in the countryside, as the report states that the application site is in Woodmancote hamlet. It is not. It is a long way outside the hamlet, down a narrow metalled track. It's nearly 5 miles to drive to the nearest shop and school. I live in the centre of my ward, and it takes me over 20 minutes to drive to Dunley. In the previous refused application, the same planning officer described the building as being in an isolated rural location. So this application should be considered for approval under the NPPF Para 84. We want older people to move to smaller homes without making them move away from their support networks. The local need has been established, not by a developer, but by 2 local families in the Woodmancote area. And the local community have almost all supported this proposal as a way of meeting that need. The officer's report infers such development would need to both meet an identified need and realise local community aspirations. But MTRA only requires one or the other. The development clearly has community support and so could be allowed under MTRA 3. The community in Woodmancote is thriving, with a church, 2 farms and 19 light industrial business units providing jobs for local people. A new modest family home will help make this community more sustainable. Our own local plan policies support new smaller housing in a rural area. MTRA 3 allows for it. Policy DM3 encourages it. And saved policies CE23 and CE24 explicitly allow for conversion of buildings in the countryside that do not significantly change the character of the existing dwelling. In addition, the supplementary planning document covering this area, the Micheldever VDS, also supports this application. It is proposed to change this large 5 to 6 bedroom house into 2 more modest homes of 3 and 4 bedrooms and 2 and 3 bedrooms, far more suitable for this isolated location, making the local community more sustainable in both the short and long term, without any real change to the character of the area. Please permit this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Godfrey. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the local councillor? No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And our final contribution is from Jane and Graham Milsom. Welcome. Have they been approved?
Yes.
Yes, okay, lovely. The officers will deal with that for you. So when you start speaking, you have 3 minutes between you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jane and this is my husband Graham, and we are both the applicants. We moved into Woodmancott in 2002. Initially, a Ford in Dunley was a pipe dream. However, when I told my parents about the house, they decided to sell up and come with us, and suddenly the house became affordable. Dunley originally had offices that were attached to the house, and we converted these offices into a one-bedroom annex for my parents. Although, as you can see from the pictures, it is a totally separate residential dwelling and only linked by a covered walkway. We lived happily like this until my parents sadly passed away in 2016. Now with the annex standing empty, we decided to rent out Dunley Den with Cottages for You as a holiday let, and we did this from 2016 until 2023. Once our daughter left home, our thoughts turned to downsizing in order to retire. With great sadness, I broke this to our neighbours of 20 years. Surprisingly, our neighbours, who have farmed in Woodmancott for over 50 years, were thinking along the same lines. I jokingly said we should remove the link between the two houses and sell you Dunley to downsize into, and we can retire into Dunley Den, and that is how this idea was born. We are not developers. The two dwellings are already built. They have been used as two residential dwellings since 2002. Dunley Den has its own front door and driveway. All our neighbours want to do is to be able to retire and stay in the big village that we both love.
Good morning. It seems the main objection is the introduction of a new address into the rural countryside, but Dunley Den is already built, has its own address, and has been there since 2002, when we changed, under building regs, the use of the offices to a self-contained annex for Jane's parents. The footprint of Dunley Den will hardly alter. 3 walls will remain the same, with only a very small extension to the rear to bring it in line with the rear of Dunley. It already has an upper level. When our first planning application was refused, we asked the planning officer for advice, who suggested we apply for a certificate of lawfulness to demonstrate that Dunley Den had been rented out as a self-contained holiday let from 2016. This was turned down because we had an internal flood in 2019 that rendered Dunley Den uninhabitable for 4 months, and due to COVID. During COVID, Dunley Den was on Cottages for You's books the whole time and available for rental, but of course, no one was at liberty to come. I feel this was a very harsh judgment to view these reasons as a break and therefore refuse our certificate, as it had genuinely been rented out for over 4 years. I also would like to point out that since 2016, Dunley Den was liable for council tax but was 0 rated as a small business. The council has been aware of us renting it out as a separate dwelling, so this is not retrospective. Finally, I do find it particularly harsh that the officer lends such little weight to our letters of support and dismiss them as not showing clear community support. There are 15 houses in Woodmancott, of which 13 have written a letter of support. I would argue this clearly shows overwhelming community support, and respectfully request this application to be permitted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and well done on the timing. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for our applicants? No, you've been very eloquent. Thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seats. Thank you. So Liz, do you want to add anything following the public contributions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, members. So we now go to questions on the report. We'll take the whole report for questions. Just indicate which page you're referring to if you have any questions, please. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. This particular part of the property that we're talking about, could you tell us exactly what size it is? Mention has been said about the small properties, so one would assume it's under 120 square metres on its own. Would that be correct or not?
In terms of the building as it is now, it's approximately 110 square metres. With the extensions, it's going to be just over 150 square metres total.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to confirm, I believe it's correct, that the height of the adjustments, I guess there's no change in the actual height of the upgrade. Is that correct?
So in roof height,
Yes, roof height.
I measured a minor increase of half metre overall.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask, the PV panels, presumably any style of PV panels is acceptable given its location, or do we need to condition that in terms of visual impact as it's the countryside?
Yeah, we quite often condition PV panels as part of planning decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask about the ecology? I noticed that there was a field hedge that has been removed. If we were minded to approve this application, I mean, presumably there'd be a whole swathe of conditions that would have to be added to it. But could one of those be a replacement hedge? And if so, where would it go? And my other question is on numbers of bedrooms. So this has been described as a small 2-bedroom house. Well, it might be 2 bedrooms at the moment, but I see on the plans definitely 3 bedrooms and an upstairs study, which could easily be a 4th bedroom. So just for clarity, if you could explain that, please.
On the landscaping, yeah, so I've drafted a list of potential conditions in the event that it's approved, one of which includes landscaping. So generally with a landscaping condition, it would include boundary treatment. So that would include scope to request hedgerow planting along the field boundary. On the point about conditions and bedroom numbers, my view on putting a condition about how internal space is used. Then
sorry, I didn't want to condition bedroom numbers. I just wanted clarification on the size of the proposed new dwelling.
Yeah, so it's 155 as proposed with the extensions.
And 3 bedrooms with a study upstairs.
Yeah, one's labelled as a study, so we couldn't prevent that from, yeah.
Just for clarity, thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Given the statements by the Parish Council and the Ward Council about the importance of providing sustainable downsizing accommodation in the area, maybe I've missed it, but is it possible to condition to make sure this doesn't become an B&B, becomes a holiday let, given that there obviously is a need, from what I'm hearing, for this to be used for local community?
It's not something I've come across myself, and usually we would do it the other way around. So we've got a standard condition for holiday let uses, but given that we have some wording for that, then it's something, unless you think otherwise, members could consider in terms of it being used for a long-term let as opposed to short-term let. There might be some wording around that possibly.
I think, Chair, I just like to say I don't think it's quite reasonable to do that. It is a unit of residential accommodation at the moment. It's a bit of a grey area about whether there's a change of use involved. It's something the government are looking at in the future in terms of looking at short types of tenure lets, but we're not there yet with that. It would be up to you to make your decisions based on what you're hearing today in terms of the policies and whether you think it's acceptable to use this as a sort of unrestricted unit of residential accommodation.
I think, Councillor, as well, you're permitting residential use class C3. So that's 365 24/7 occupation. If it became a holiday let, where's the harm? It could be less than 365 24/7. So you'll have to evidence there's harm here if it became a holiday let.
And members also need to remember that we can't condition the occupants of any residence. We are looking at whether or not we build a new house in the countryside effectively, which is what is being applied for here. Councillor Small.
Can I just ask about the local support? What constitutes local support? The applicant said 13 out of 15 neighbours. Is there a threshold for that?
Chair, MTRA 3 illustrates what we might consider local support, and often we would look at that being done perhaps as with the local stakeholders, and then also looking at the people that live there as well. In this case, Woodman Cot is really small, so I would perhaps contend that 17 support letters and the local ward members is quite proportionate to the size of that community, but that's a sort of balance for you to make your own decisions on.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchins. Anybody else with a question? No. So we move to debate. And I think I'm going to kick things off, if I may. So I went to visit this site myself. And as the ward councillor pointed out, it's not the easiest place to find. It's at the end of a single track no-through road, not that far from the motorway, so it is subject to quite a lot of motorway noise. And there are just the 3 dwellings in that tiny hamlet, if you include this as a separate dwelling. And I think it looks clear from the view of it that it is effectively a separate dwelling, despite being still connected to the original house. I find that I have a lot of sympathy and support for the parish council. Parish councils very rarely support new developments in their parishes, particularly, you know, when it's a new building in a rural area, and they usually do so for good reason. Now, whilst, as I said, we can't condition the occupants, nevertheless, places like Woodman Cot will die without some form of development, and it's a scattered settlement with lots of different little collections of tiny numbers of dwellings. I think that we should take great account of the local support and the general feeling in the local community that this is an acceptable form of development. I've looked at the plans. I don't think that the proposed changes will detract from the area. Far from it. I think they will improve the look of the house and the look generally of this small hamlet. I would like to see a replacement hedge because it does stick out rather into the field, to delineate the difference between the rural area and the residential settlement. But I am minded to go against the officer recommendation in this case and to support this application with some strong conditions which we can discuss when we've made our decision whether or not to support the officer recommendation. So, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Godfrey explained the situation extremely well and pointed out that this, in a sense, is not a new structure. The structure's already there. So we're talking about, do we convert it into another property? This is the second one in, I think, about 2 years, 3 years that we've had a similar thing. The last one we went against, but nonetheless, this one is again a small dwelling in the countryside. It's a small dwelling in a community, and the one thing that the district as a whole is desperate for are small structures for living accommodation. It's a very small amount of adaptation to make it slightly larger, but I'm sure that possibly could be done under permitted development if the connecting passage was blocked off. So I don't know, but I think it's only here because it's a subdivision of an original property. There is no new structure. I believe that, like yourself, Chair, that this is acceptable. It has been proven by the support from the local community for its use. So I would be going against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. The level of a settlements community and parish council support for an application such as this is a material consideration. The question is, does its support in this case outweigh the identified policy conflict of MTRA 3? On page 24, the officer says that this has not been demonstrated that the proposed application could reasonably be said to meet a specific community need or support the settlement's role and function. The development plan envisages this support would come from the community, but that this process undertaken in this instance does not appear to have involved any form of referendum or formal input from the parish council. In the last 5 years, I cannot recall any application with such overwhelming community support. 17 supporting comments without a single objection. And yes, contrary to the officer's report, a formal input of support from the parish council. If that isn't community referendum, I don't know what is. Contrary to the officer's determination, this only increases the weight that should be given to the supporting comments received. I would strongly suggest that these material considerations do outweigh the identified policy conflict of MTRA 3, and I should be voting to support the applicant in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Any more contributions to debate? Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. I quite understand where the officers come from. I think that the policies are reasonably clear, but in this case, we've got a building which is more or less separated at the moment, and I cannot see what harm it would do, bearing in mind that the local community is fully committed behind this. I would just like to see some conditions on it just to make sure that we get to the best energy efficiency of the conversion. So I'm afraid I should be going against the recommendation on this point.
Okay, members, so can I see all those in favour of the officer's recommendation that we refuse this application? All those in favour? And those against? So I believe that's unanimous. Okay, members, so we need to agree the reasons and then we need to think about conditions.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just summarise some of the debate that I've had in terms of minuting the reasons that you're not following the officer's recommendation. Material considerations such as hearing that it's a small dwelling that's providing sustainable downsizing in a rural area. The weight that you're attaching to the local support being proportionate to the sort of size of the community and the scale of that. And that you're not considering that there's any material harm in the intensification of this difference of uses, and it's of a form therefore that would be compatible with the character of the village. So you could suggest that you found it to be in accordance with MTRA 3, or that those other issues of sustainability in its rural location outweighed anything that was not compatible with MTRA 3.
Thank you. And again, this is a unique situation and will not set any precedent.
No, it won't. So if we agree those reasons.
And what about conditions?
And Liz, you've got a rundown of the conditions, haven't you, that you would recommend? Do you want to just run us through those quickly?
Yeah. So thank you, Chair. I've got a list of suggested conditions. So the first would be that development is carried out in accordance with the plans as submitted. Next one down would be details of how the agricultural land to the southeast would be delineated from the residential garden use. So that might include some form of subdivision between the two areas. The others, just that external facing material should match those on the existing building, as that's what's been stated on the application. Then there'd be a scheme of landscaping, so that would include planting arrangements and also other means of enclosure, along with any additional hard surfaces, if any are proposed. Then there would be the standard conditions which relate to the habitat regulations, the Grampian condition relating to nutrient neutrality, and then any details of foul and surface water, given that there is additional built development proposed. So that's That's the list of conditions that I got for that.
Okay, well, the details of the conditions, of course, will be agreed between myself and officers if we approve this application. But that's given you a general idea of the sort of things that we will cover. So with those conditions, the proposal now is that this application should be approved. So can I see all those in favour of approving this application? So I think that's all members. Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, members. So that application is approved with the conditions to be agreed. Thank you. Thank you. So we just have a brief pause whilst the officer changes for the next item. Thank you. Item. There he is. Welcome, Cameron. Are you okay? You all sorted? I just sort out the presentation. Apologies, we have a slight technical issue, which hopefully we'll sort out soon with the presentation. All right, so what we're going to do is I was going to have a break after the next item, but what we're going to do is have a break now whilst the computer is sorted out, which will take a few minutes apparently. So we will now take a short break and return at 25 past. So thank you very much. Matthew? Okay, members, let's, if you could take your seats again, please, members. We need to get started again. Thank you. So this next application, item number 7 on our agendas, is a conversion to HMO, house in multiple occupation, and the addition of bike storage at 59 Colebrook Street in Winchester. And our presenting officer is Cameron Taylor. Over to you, Cameron.
Thank you very much, Chair. So on top of the update sheet, I say the updates in the update sheet, I'd like to do a verbal update as well. The first one is for the addition of a nutrient neutrality condition, which is our standard gramping condition, which wasn't put on the original set of conditions when this was put up for committee. And the second one would be another condition, which would be then limit the occupancy to be in line with permission, which is to be for 6 individual tenants, which would be 1 per bedroom. So yes.
Sorry, can I just ask, is that 6 of any particular, is that just 6 individuals?
Just 6 individual tenants.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So yes, this is a presentation for the conversion to HMO along with the additional bike store at 59 Colebrook Street. So I say on the screen we have the site location plan, the site marked by the red outline, where I'll just highlight we've got the Guildhall just on the right hand side of that plan there, along with the Winchester City Council Colebrook offices, which are just to the south, but within the blue outline. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. And here we have the existing and proposed site plan, the top plan being the existing, the bottom one being the proposed. There is no external footprint changes with the exception of the addition of the enclosed bike store, which is for the tenants of the building itself, along with the addition of the visitor bike store as well. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. And here we have an aerial photo, the site marked by the yellow triangle. The external changes to the building do include removal of existing chimneys, which can just about be seen up to the top of the yellow triangle past the pitch. There are 2 sort of slightly light grey areas which will be removed. Thank you. If we go to the next slide. And here we have the front elevation, existing being the left, the proposed being the right. And they say on the left one, which is the existing, we can see the chimney, which they say will be removed as part of this application, but there are no additional changes to the fenestration. Thank you. Go to the next slide. Next, we have some street view, which is looking south from Colebrook Street, with the building itself being the dwelling on the left-hand side, which is currently white. And then the right-hand photo is just one step a bit further back, close towards Broadway, along with High Street. Again, where we can just see the building itself, just on the left-hand side, which is the white building. Thank you. Go to the next slide. Thank you. Next, we have the street view, which is looking to the north, with the left-hand one just being as Market Lane joins Colebrook Street, which gives a better idea of the front fenestration of the building itself, which is very limited. And then the right-hand one is one looking up to the north towards Broadway and High Street. Again, where you can just see just where the red brick ends, where the white building is, that is where 59 Colebrook Street sits. Thank you. Next slide. Next, we have the rear elevations. Again, existing being the left, proposed being the right, where the only change, as we can see, is the removal of the chimney, which can be seen be removed on the right-hand plan. There are no additional changes to the fenestration. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. And then the side elevation, again, there's no changes to the fenestration itself. Next slide. Next, we have the ground floor plans, existing being the left, proposed being the right, which we can see it includes a 1 bedroom, which is marked by the blue, followed by the green, which is the shared living room and kitchen, along with a bathroom, along with a wet room as well. And then if we go to the next slide, please, which is for the first floor, the only changes to this is the subdivision of an existing larger room, which then create 2 bedrooms. So there'll be 4 bedrooms within the first floor, along with a wet room. Next slide, please. Finally, we've got the second floor plans, which is going to be for a single bedroom, which has an ensuite along with a masonette itself. And then if we go to the final slide, which has plans for the bike store, this is the enclosed bike store, which is there for the tenants themselves, which they say can store 6 bikes. And if we go to the final slide, which is the officer's recommendation for this application, is to permit this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron. So we just have 2 public speakers for this item. And the first one is the Cabinet Member, Councillor Chris Westwood. Councillor Westwood, as you know, you have up to 5 minutes from when you start speaking. Take your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this application. Firstly, some background to this application. The planning application supports a proposal to bring back into use 59 Colebrook Street to provide temporary accommodation to refugee groups on specific identified government resettlement schemes. The property has been empty since June 2021, and this is a good opportunity to bring back an empty property into use to support these households. And once the property is not needed for households on the resettlement scheme, it can be used for general temporary accommodation within the council's stock. Previously, the property had been rented out as an HMO for up to 7 occupants. This proposal was agreed at Cabinet on the 21st of November 2023 and also at full council on the 30th of November 2023 and is supported by a £250,000 grant from Hampshire County Council and a £206,000 grant from the Local Authority Housing Fund. The property is in good central location to enable access to training and employment is near and all transport links. The property would enable individuals on the resettlement schemes to live alongside each other, providing support and assisting with the continued integration into our community. Turning to this application, the planning application before you today is brought primarily for approval for change of use of one room in 59 Colbert Street, previously used as an office when the property was rented out as an HMO, to a bedroom. I would like to address 2 specific points that have been raised on this application: the comment from the Environmental Health Officer on noise and also the objection from City of Winchester Trust on internal layout. Firstly, the comment by the Environmental Health Officer regarding the proximity of a pub with late night opening and potential noise impacts. The Environmental Health Officer has recommended a full noise assessment and report be undertaken. To address this comment, a detailed noise report has been commissioned by Match Consulting and its recommendations will be included and incorporated into the development. In addition, the proposal will be subject to building regulations approval, which includes resistance to sound. Looking at the proximity of the pub, I should also point out that licensed premises have an obligation to operate in a manner to meet the licensing objective of prevention of public nuisance. And should this not be the case, then the licensing authority can and should review the premises licence. Looking at the objection from the City of Winchester Trust, who suggests more communal space should be provided and also suggest that the proposed ground floor bedroom be allocated as a living area. Firstly, the proposal already includes a large communal lounge and kitchen area, and it also includes 2 wet rooms and an ensuite shower room. These facilities meet the requirements of a 6-bed HMO, and the proposed layout is considered acceptable by the case officer. Secondly, when registering their objection, the City of Winchester Trust, who are not here today to explain in more detail why they're objecting, has not specified any planning reason as a basis for their objection. And the case officer is very clear in their report that the planning application before you today does meet planning policy. In summary, there is a growing homelessness crisis in this country and Winchester District is not immune to this crisis. We need more temporary accommodation in Winchester to meet rising demand. Bringing this property back into use will reduce the need for the council to secure emergency accommodation in the form of bed and breakfast for those households on resettlement schemes, and provides a better housing option for our guests who would otherwise be threatened with homelessness. We have secured grant funding for a significant proportion of this refurbishment of what is an unused building in the city centre, and this is a sound investment for Winchester City Council that will bring back into use a historic city centre building. The issue of noise is adequately covered by the application and existing licensing objectives. The objection from the City of Winchester Trust has no planning reason to support it. I do hope you'll be minded to follow the office recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Members, do we have any questions for the Cabinet member? No, thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was picking up on the comments from the Winchester Trust about common living space. I note there's a shared living room, and that prompted a thought in my mind: is this all going to be furnished?
I can't comment on that, but I believe the team are speaking after me, who may be able to answer that question for you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Westwood. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And our second supporter is Mitchell Cowan on behalf of the City Council. If you'd like to come forward. And you have 3 minutes between you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application directly supports the council's plan for delivering homes for all. There is a need to provide temporary accommodation for single households who can no longer reside with their host in their current accommodation. There are currently 60 single households residing with hosts in the Winchester district today. Single households make up largest numbers of Homes for Ukraine cohort within the district of Winchester, alongside facing the greatest challenges in sourcing affordable and good quality accommodation within the district. 59 Colbrook Street is an ideal property for the temporary accommodation because of its location, accessibility to employment and transport links, and the support that will be provided to the Winchester resettlement team, which are based next door in the city offices. The property will be refurbished to meet the Exceed and current building regulations and will be of a high standard. The proposal is to create 6 bedrooms, 4 washrooms, a communal lounge, kitchen, all meeting HMO standards. The property will benefit from acoustic improvements, upgrading of thermal insulation, and other sustainable improvements. The property has been vacant since 2021, and with the assistance of LAHF and Hampshire County grant funding, the property can be brought back to use to accommodate individuals who have been displaced by the war. It will enable Ukrainians to live alongside each other and providing support and assistance while continuing to integrate into our community. In conclusion, proposal supports council plan priorities, homes for all, greener, faster, and aligns with the principles of the City of Sanctuary, which the council has signed up for.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll go back to my question, which I think was deflected to you in terms of is the building going to be furnished for the occupants? And then can I ask, as part of that, can you just highlight what the HMO space allocation should be per person? Are these bedrooms all single occupant, and are they meeting those requirements?
Yes, the property will be furnished, carpets, white goods will all be included. In terms of HMO standards, the room sizes exceed HMO standards and can be used for single occupants or couples.
And does the HMO standard deem that we should have adequate shared living space, communal space? And if so, are we meeting that requirement?
Again, it exceeds it.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the removal of the chimney. Although not prominent from sort of the street scene, it is a bit of a shame to sort of lose it within the conservation zone. I was just wondering sort of the reasoning behind losing the chimney.
It's been a source of water leak and it's a weak point within the building. As you say, it's tucked behind the building. It can't be seen from the street scene. And it gives us the opportunity to re-roof it and increase the insulation as well.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. It's basically on the chimney. I was going to ask it later. Are you removing just the top of the chimney? Because according to the drawings, if I'm reading them correctly, it's an external chimney. So is it just the top that's been removed?
Yes, we're just taking it down to just below roof level.
If there are no more questions, thank you very much indeed. You may return to your seats now. Thank you. Cameron, did you want to add anything following the contributions?
I've got nothing further to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, lovely. So members, I'll take questions on any part of this report if you have any questions for our officer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple, if I may. The one is the sustainable drainage. It's in the flood zone too, and we all are aware that literally across the road from the Guildhall is prone to flooding. On the corner of Colebrook Street is prone to some flooding. I'm just a little concerned about how we're going to deal with that flooding area. Unfortunately, I didn't get my papers until yesterday, so I've not been able to read them. I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning reading the first 4 items, so it may well be in there and I may well have missed it. The other one, Chair, is with regards to the gas boiler. It meets minimum standards. Is this not the point that we could actually raise that minimum standard to something a little better?
Cameron?
With regards to the drainage, the proposal isn't seeking to expand the footprint of the dwelling, the building itself, and so it's sort of considered that given it's an existing building within a built-up area itself, it's sort of right. It's sort of the impact upon the flooding that sort of wouldn't be affected as a result of this proposal itself. It's just given the nature of the building currently and the area itself.
Chair, in respect to the gas boiler, that's not material planning consideration that we're able to have any control over.
Or if I may, there's already a concern about the usage of water. Can we cover the fact that this is now going to be usable by 6 different sets of people? Is there enough power in that water supply?
I think it's been used before as an HMO for 6 or more people, so I don't think that. But Cameron, did you want to comment on that?
The site previously was noted as being within a HMO use, so it's sort of just reverting back to a historic use it has had previously. So we consider that it would be sufficient enough to accommodate the tenants.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Lee.
Yeah, can I go back to the chimneys again, please? So the chimneys need to be removed because they're leaking, is that correct? And it's the easiest way to remediate the problem?
I'd say that's what the Home Team had said, that is a sort of water ingress, so the removal of it will allow them to then do the repair works to the roof and then also remove that as a potential source in the future for any potential leaks. Yes.
And the reason I ask the question is that in these old buildings, I know we're not here to do building regs, sometimes you can introduce passive ventilation by use of the chimneys, which then would help these old buildings to be more viable, comfortable places to live in, to be accommodated in. And I just wonder whether a bit of lateral thinking is required rather than perhaps all the costs of taking away chimneys. But I just highlight it as an opportunity.
Chair, the team who are proposing this are here today to listen to those options. Really, the main consideration is if this chimney does need planning permission to be removed, because the principal ones are the only ones that do, and this isn't viewed, it's really whether it has whether it conserves the impact on the conservation area or not, rather than looking to try to improve ventilation, things like that. But the team are here to take those thoughts away.
I'm sure they will take on board our concerns about ventilation. I'm sure they know about that sort of thing anyway. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask for a little clarification about the refuse and recycling storage area. I just wonder, how does that work? Who has access to it? Is it adequate for the capacity of the building in this new iteration?
So I believe within the plan to note it as being within the access, sort of what probably used to be a vehicular access to the site, to the rear courtyard of the site itself. So that now doesn't need to serve as vehicular access for parking, because it would only have the bike sort of to the rear. So it's quite a large space there. So we consider it to be suitable, I say, for the refuse, which would then be accessed for all the tenants for there.
So, we can be confident that there will be no bins left out on this narrow street.
Yes, we'd be confident they will be behind that sort of the gate to which accesses that access.
Councillor Lee, another bite of the cherry.
Yes.
Carry on.
Sorry, I probably should have asked this question earlier. I was thinking about the HMO living space exceeding the requirement, which is great. And God forbid we should have another COVID pandemic. I'm thinking about the mental health. You know, we've got vulnerable people in quite a small space. If they're restricted to the building and so on, thinking about the furniture and so on, it's just a concern. Is that communal living space adequate? Should it be slightly bigger? Can it be made bigger given the extreme occasions that might arise in the future?
I'd say, as I had mentioned, it does exceed the requirements for a HMO, but I'd say they do also have the courtyard to the rear of the property itself, so they wouldn't be just constrained to the rooms themselves. They have their own, they have a little private outdoor space to the rear, which should something like that come up again, I'm pretty sure that could be arranged if they had their own individual time within that space to provide fresh air and sort of just get out of the building.
And we have heard that the provision of communal space exceeds the minimum requirements, so I think we can be confident that they'll be fine. Okay, so if there are no more questions on the report, members, we've moved to debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. No, I strongly support this application for approval. Whilst it is sort of a shame that, you know, the chimney will be lost, I'm quite satisfied that you're not able to see it from the street scene, and other buildings nearby, such as the Guildhall, dominate the roof view anyway. So any loss of the chimney there, I think is negligible. But I just want to put on record that I strongly support this application.
Councillor Lee.
Yes, likewise. Thank you, Chair. As the HMO does not harm the setting of the listed building, and it obviously provides essential temporary accommodation, I'm very happy to support the application.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Every time I've walked past this building, I've always been saddened by it. It's in the right old state. You go past, paint peeling, windows rotting, downpipes loose, water cascading on the walls, and you think, you know, every month the bill to fix it's going to get bigger and bigger. And that's right in the heart of our centre, next to our offices. And dare I say it, the worst part is it's a council building, council-owned building. And I'm really, really glad to see that being sorted out. We've got this really big housing problem. And, you know, here we are with an asset being neglected, and so I will support this. I'm very pleased, you know, to hear from Councillor Westwood, and you know, the idea of bringing it back into use, and of course it does meet the HMO standards. Let's get it done. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you. So, members, the proposal before us is to permit this application. So can I see all those in favour of the Otterson recommendation, please? Yeah, that's all, members. Lovely. So that application is approved with the extra conditions that were described at the beginning and those on the update sheet. Thank you very much. Okay, members, our next item on the agenda is item number 8, and it is the erection of a 4-bedroom, 1.5-storey house on the site of a former dwelling at Edenbridge, Winchester Road, Waltham Chase. And our presenting officer again is Cameron Taylor. Over to you, Cameron.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this presentation is for, the erection of a 4-bed dwelling at Edenbridge, along Winchester Road. Thank you. If we go to the next slide, please. So here we have the site location plan. They say, give you sort of a quick little rundown of the site itself. So what is currently within there, that building itself, that is to be demolished under the original application in 2021. So it sort of subdivides the plot itself into create a new dwelling there. They say it's down the end of it, an access which serves not only the site itself, but also the Bramleys and also Jubilee Cottage, Honeysuckle Cottage, a number of dwellings as well. Thank you. Go to the next slide. And I've sort of superimposed the proposed site plan along with the location plan to give better context to the area and how it would sit with the proposed dwelling. So they say where the sign Edenbridge is, that is the location of the proposed dwelling itself, with the dwelling which was approved on 2021 again, which that was done with the demolition of the original dwelling itself in mind. The proposed dwelling retains a gap over 20 metres, I say, to the nearest, or to the dwelling, to the Hollyoak neighbouring property along to the east. Then go to the next slide. And say, just to give further context, here we have the WCC GIS, our Winchester City Council GIS map, to sort of give better context, where they say it is within the settlement boundary of Waltham Chase itself, but it's a where it then goes from the sort of light colour to the green, that is where the boundary of the settlement boundary ends. Then go to the next slide. And again, just an aerial photo, site marked by yellow triangle. So the current building where the yellow triangle is, that is the existing property which is to be demolished. And to the north, where there's existing buildings, those have been removed, and there's the current erection of the replacement dwelling for Edenbridge itself. Thank you. Next slide. And here we have the existing and proposed site plan. And say I've superimposed the site plan with the existing one, as I can give context where the current dwelling is, and say the proposed one. So they say the proposed one itself is situated to the south of the one which has been approved on 2021 permission, with Bramley's as well, just being visible at the bottom of the drawing itself, with the new proposed dwelling and the one which is under construction sharing an access to the east of the site itself. Thank you. Next slide. And here we have the northeast elevation, the top being existing, the bottom being proposed. You see the proposed dwelling itself with a 1.5 story appearance with the use of the half dormers. To the front, the left two windows, the ones which serve bathrooms, whilst the right-hand window itself serves a bedroom. It is proposed to be facing brickwork. However, to confirm the external finish of that will be dealt with as under reserve matters. Go to the next slide, please. And here we have a photo. The left-hand photo is down the access, starting looking towards the site itself from the access, where we've got a new build. It's just visible on the left, and say the pink building is currently Edenbridge, but that is to be conditioned. That was conditioned under 2021 permission to be demolished when that building is complete. And then the right-hand photo, we have Edenbridge itself with the neighbouring property of Bramley's visible as well. Thank you. Next slide. And these other two photos just further down the access. The left-hand photo is sort of just where the access meets the main road itself, and the right-hand one is just slightly a bit further down to sort of give what the viewpoint down the access would be towards the site. Thank you. Next slide. Next, we have the southwest elevation. Say existing being top, proposed being the bottom. We see that it retains the symmetrical appearance with the dormers. Again, half scale dormers. As I say, to the rear, matching the front itself. Thank you. Next slide. And then we have a photo from within the rear of the garden of Bramley's, which is looking towards the rear elevation. As I say, just to give the context of the current dwelling in itself. Next slide, please. Next, we have the northwest elevation. Again, so with this, we can see how the dormers will match in terms of their scale and appearance, with the use of a gable end to the dwelling itself. Whilst there, as we see on the left-hand side of the proposed photo of the ground floor area, we can see the proposed porch, which will be to the front of the dwelling. Next slide, please. And here we have a photo which is currently within sort of the area where they're building the previously approved dwelling, looking south towards, the current location of the Edenbridge, sort of the area of the proposed dwelling. They say again, we can see just where the Brambles is in the right-hand side of both of those photos. Thank you. Next slide. And then we have a photo looking north, within the access where it turns to enter the Brambles, which is the named property to the south. And they say we can see the current construction of that previously permitted dwelling, which was permitted in 2021. Next slide, please. Next, we have the southeast elevation, the existing proposed, and within the proposed, that's the lower gable itself. That is where the proposed garage is going to be. Again, with the porch now being on the right-hand side as that fronts the access. Following slide. Next slide, please. And next we have a photo, which is these within the Brambles itself, looking towards the north. Say within the left-hand photo, you can just about see the construction of the new dwelling itself, just behind the cars, and then the next one a bit further back to just sort of give the context of the proximity between Brambles itself and the current dwelling to be demolished, Edenbridge. Next slide, please. Next, you have the ground floor existing proposed plans, existing being the left, right-hand one being proposed. Again, where you can just see the two sort of grey little squares, that gives sort of the orientation of the dwelling, where that will be the porch itself. They say with an attached garage to it. Go to the next slide. Followed by the first floor existing and proposed plans. And again, where I just noted in the elevation drawings itself, that the two windows when looking at it on the left and the center are for bathrooms, and the right-hand one itself is to bedroom and habitable room. Thank you. Next slide. And I'll just note the additional photo on the left says to the north of the site. That is incorrect. It should actually note to the east of the site. So that is the view outlook from the site towards the east, towards the countryside. And then the right-hand photo is that towards the northeast boundary of the site, between the site and Hollyoak. And that ends the author's presentation, with the recommendation being to permit the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. We have one public speaker on this item, which is the representative of the Parish Council, Steve Slark. Good morning, Mr. Slark. So you will have 3 minutes from when you start speaking, so please take your time, and the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sheffield Parish Council would like to object to the erection of the new dwelling on 3 simple basic premises, really. That originally the planning permission was given for the new dwelling adjacent to Eden Bridge on the proviso that Eden Bridge was demolished within 3 months. That now is under construction. It's been under construction for a few years as it's a self-build, and Eden Bridge is still there. And now they've asked for a planning permission to build a new house on the site of Eden Bridge. The Sheffield Parish Council contends that you can't demolish a building twice, and that really the original planning consent should remain because of overdevelopment down the end of the lane. The other thing is the lane is highly unsuitable for additional traffic. Unfortunately, the pictures shown in the presentation were very cleverly put together. At its widest, or shall I say its smallest point, the lane is just over 3.5 meters wide, and one of the cottages or buildings that was built by Alderbury House abutting the lane has been hit twice, causing structural damage to the wall and the guttering. And any building lorries going down there just cannot get down there. They cannot turn, and then they have to reverse for probably around about 75 yards back out onto the main B1277. Similarly, anybody coming to visit there has no place to turn around. There is no turning circle, and they similarly have to reverse all the way back. The planning officer's contention that it won't increase traffic, I find it wholly inaccurate, since there is only one house down at the moment with 2 cars and 2 dwellings down there, 1 3-bedroom with a double garage and 1 4-bedroom. You could argue in the future that could be mum, dad, 2 kids, could be up to 4 cars per dwelling. It just does not support that level of traffic. Past what is a blind corner as you get towards the end of the lane, and then backwards out onto the 2177. The other issue is that there were dedicated bin stores erected for the new developments that were made, but they are full. There is nowhere else to put a bin without obstructing sight lines as you reverse, or maybe go, if you're lucky enough to go forwards, out onto the B1277, which would be right opposite the entrance to Morgan's Yard, the new development. And just think that the whole thing will be, well, it's a disaster waiting to happen, quite frankly. That's the basis of our objection. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Slark? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, John. You indicated if a vehicle has to reverse out.
Yes.
What classification of road is it reversing out onto? What is the speed limit?
It's a 30 miles per hour speed limit. It's the B2177, but it is a very, very busy B road between Wickham and Bishop's Waltham. And because of the Wellbourne development, we only suspect that will get much busier, and there will also be access to Morgan's Yard, literally right opposite. There is nowhere for a car coming in from the main road to pull in and meet another car. Another car would have to reverse probably 60 or 70 yards.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. You may
Pleasure.
return to your
Thank
seat.
you.
If you could
Thank
just
you.
switch off the microphone as you go. Thank you. Cameron, did you want to add anything following that contribution?
I don't want anything, add any further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, so we'll move to questions. If I could kick off the questions. So are we conditioning a construction plan? And if not, can we do so? We have a question about the bin store. So if you could reassure us that there is a bin store that will adequately deal with the bins and so on when they're collected. And can you tell us, is this what you would consider a sustainable location? So is it on a bus route or a cycle route? Those sorts of questions.
With regards to the application itself, I'll just need to double check if a construction management plan could be attached. Should it be permitted for that? Just to confirm that. But with regards to it, it's for outline permission, and under the reserve matters, that would include provision to be made for parking, turning, loading, unloading of vehicles, the alignment, height, materials, all walls, fences, means of enclosure. That's put under, and the reserve matters would need to be submitted to before they can commit to any construction itself.
Could that limit the size of vehicles that were going down that very narrow lane?
Chair, they're reserved matters, so it's more to do with the house itself, but we can add an additional condition that can deal with construction management, an actual condition. It would deal with things like the storage of materials, the vehicle movements, where they're going to park for all the construction vehicles. We also expect, we normally add an informative on that they're expected to sign up to the considerate constructors as well, which is so they can directly manage the situation with neighbours in addition to our compliance officers if necessary.
Thank you.
With regards to the refuse, they say on site they would obviously have the garage space, and they say we're still waiting with under reserve matters to work out the access and sort of the parking arrangements there. But to just looking inside, it would appear to have ample storage on site for their own refuse, and then I believe it would then just be taken down to the street when it gets picked up on, let's say, on their day itself.
And the sustainability of the site?
With regards, I couldn't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately, the particular bus routes or if there are any bus stops in the area.
I think it is a bus route, actually.
However, they say that what I remember, I believe there is pedestrian access along the road, which then provide road access, hopefully any nearby bus, but unfortunately I can't comment.
Yeah, just to add, the site opposite, as mentioned, was an allocated site, and those sites are picked because of their sustainable locations. It's on a major route through the sort of district of Winchester.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted just to pick up on the surface water drainage and ask the officer if he's aware of the locality problems south side of Forest Road on the Winchester Road at a junction just up from this junction at Bull Lane. The residents there are reporting toilets getting backed up, wastewater getting into the owner's garden, driveways and homes. And this is, and I've actually seen wastewater coming out of manholes. And if I remember correctly, from the Solomon's Lane development, Southern Water recognised this is an area of poor drainage, risk of flooding, and so on, and big issues about proposed connection points. So I'm reading the condition, and I'm looking at, and I pulled it out, what was then commented on by Southern Water, and I don't feel that the condition is strong enough to allay fears that more load is going to go into this foul sewage and the surface water drainage system in this area, which is a recognised issue. The infrastructure is not coping well, and as I recall from my quick look at the geology, this is a clay. There's a clay geology issue as well, so it's not permeable in terms of where the water goes. So I wonder if you could perhaps indicate whether you've actually taken a good look at this and cross-reference that to the Southern Water's comments for land of Solomon Lane, please. Thank you.
With regards to this application, I believe I consulted with our drainage engineer, who then provided comments for it, and then I based my recommendation following the comments from drainage engineer, which included a foul and surface water plan to be submitted for the application itself. So in regards to any further, I'm not aware of that, I'm afraid.
And Chair, what I'm concerned about, again, and I've got it in front of me, Southern Water indicated with respect to Solomon's Lane, it could take 24 months for them to actually come up with a mitigation plan. And here we are connecting yet again to a infrastructure system network that is not able to cope. You know, I have names and addresses of residents who are blighted. This is not appropriate unless we can condition the surface drainage and the sewage system much more strongly. And I don't know how we do that.
Chair, the proposal is to connect to the existing systems. We have to assume that our statutory undertakers are, you know, providing and undertaking their duties as they should. As a local planning authority, there's not much we can do with that. But as a stakeholder, as a council, obviously we work a lot with those stakeholders to improve those things. It's not really within your gift to look at the broader strategic situation, but we know that there are issues in the area. This is one house, and our drainage engineers and our statutory consultees have no concern with it. We have to assume that the issues with capacity will be dealt with as a local planning authority. There's no harm that we can identify directly linked to this provision, and we've not got a directorate from any wider body that we can no longer make decisions on single houses or housing in the area.
So that's not something we can do. We are conditioning that the Southern Water should reassure us that they can cope, and that's as much as we can do, I'm afraid, Councillor.
Can I just suggest that the compromise position here is to condition the surface water issues and the drainage issues as strongly as they were for Solomon's Lane. I think the way this is currently written is not as strong as the previous condition for a location within stone's throw. Thank you.
Just to point, the difference is that this is one unit as opposed to 80 units. It's also an outline planning permission as opposed to a full planning application. So members can look at how we want the wording to further strengthen the conditions, but I would suggest that as a reserved matter, that when those details come in, they will be quite detailed in themselves for us to consider. It's a reserved matter rather than a condition.
Chair, just a final point. This is very worrying because this is just, you know, it's after the fact.
Councillor, this has been covered by the officers. I think they've taken on board what you've said. This isn't a full application. Okay, so those details will be coming through in the process, and I think we just need to rely on the officers, and they have heard what we're saying and they will take that on board. Thank you. Thank you for raising that. Councillor Laming and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Lee on the drainage problems, but moving on from that particular point, the parish council suggested that we're having a demolition of one house twice. Could we have a comment on that, because I don't really see how you can do that.
Yeah, so with regards to that, the demolition of Eden Bridge itself, that has already been dealt with under the 2021 permission, which is, I say, ongoing, to say when the completion of, within 3 months of the completion of that dwelling, it then needs to be demolished. So within their condition, they have to demolish the building within a time period following the completion when it's first occupied. That covers that with regards to demolition. This application isn't for the demolition of Eden Bridge again. This one is just for the erection of a new dwelling within land which was part of the Eden Bridge boundary itself.
Thank you, Cameron. And if I may, car parking and turning, we stipulate that cars must exit the site in a forward motion. How is that covered in this? Because it does look to me extremely tight.
So yeah, with regards to this one, that is one of the matters they'll have to deal with under reserve matters with regards to the parking, the access itself, which that would then be able to sort of cover and ensure that that can be accomplished, so say the safe entry and egress of the site itself. But say that's under reserve matters and not under this outline permission.
Yeah, but surely that should be covered by us on the outline rather than taking it to reserve matters, because it's fundamental to the actual application of this application in the first place.
It's the choice of the applicant should they wish to put in an application for outline with some matters reserved later. We'll look at the principle of these issues and the details will be sent to us at another time. That is the choice of the applicant to do that.
Again, I think the officers have heard what we're saying, and that will be covered. Okay, Councillor Reid.
Chairman, this is actually drawn to a point. This is an outline application. We have quite a few new members on the planning committee. Would it be sensible to exactly say what we are going to agree planning wise? Because we all know that when the reserve matter comes in, it can be somewhat different to the outline. So could the officers or yourself advise us exactly what we are actually going to be agreeing?
Thank you, that's helpful. Lorna, would you like to do that?
Chair, in the conditions, it's all matters are being considered apart from those that are listed in the reserved matters section on page 84. So you can see that you've got the layout and the design of the property in principle, and then things like the drainage and the landscaping is then after, which in some ways could be secondary to the house structure itself. So we know what we're getting in that respect. And then when they submit the reserved matters, they do need to materially accord with what has been approved at the outline stage. If there's minor deviations, we would have to look at that, but it has to substantially accord with what has been approved in terms of the siting and the design. And in recommending approval, we would be confident that those matters could be dealt with, given that we are recommending approval of that outline, such as the layout of, the position of the house can then accommodate landscaping on the site that's left and the drainage that's necessary, particularly given that it's connecting to existing networks.
Based on that, Chair, then we have a certain concern, I am sure. The length of the proposed access to it is a long 75 yards or meters in length with no passing point. And I think what Councillor Laney has suggested, that we ought to ensure that all vehicles moving onto a B-class road do so in a forward gear.
I say within the site itself, they sort of have a shared access between the new dwelling and the one which is being constructed on the previous permission, which then should allow it adequate turn space for them to then reverse into space to allow them to then leave in a forward gear themselves. So, but I say that's something which should only be confirmed and dealt with under the reserve matters side of it. You say we haven't confirmed the actual parking orientation, but I say just sort of having a look at the quick plans again, it would allow them to reverse into their parking space to, I say, to then leave in forward gear as well as arrive.
But looking at it that way, Chair, any vehicle which is coming out, and if there's a vehicle already on the track going in, must reverse back. Would I be correct?
Chair, even if all matters are reserved, you still have to look at in principle of how you're going to access the site, because you can't allow a permission just sort of stand alone with no access at all. So you'd always have to look at that. But you then can look at the details of the specific accesses. In this case, I doubt there will be any changes proposed. It's an access that doesn't serve a high number of development or residential units. We're only looking at one more. The traffic numbers and speeds are so low there, it would be very difficult to prove that there would be any harm to highway safety. That's our recommendation.
It's a straight access track, so you can see things coming down or going up. Yeah, and it's only a 30-mile-an-hour limit. I know people speed along there, but it is officially 30 miles an hour. Councillor Gordon-Smith, I believe you have your question has been answered. Any further questions, members? So debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the 69 bus serves that route along that road. I also support the condition in regards to a construction traffic management plan. In regards to Councillor Lee's comments, I do think it's a bit of a shame that the applicant isn't here to answer questions on how surface water runoff would be addressed. But I say that in the conditions could be addressed at a later date when a further application comes in. So I'm minded to support the officer's recommendation here.
Councillor Reid.
Chairman, likewise, I would like to support the officer's recommendation. With regards to water coming out of manhole covers, I drove from Denmead to to Botley last night, and the amount of water coming out of various manhole covers was amazing. I've never actually seen it quite like that. So there is a major problem with the amount of liquid we're getting on the roads of late.
Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I just want to emphasise again, it's already been mentioned several times, the traffic situation. That road, that Winchester Road, yes, it is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, but I can tell you that speed limit is not adhered to. So this is a real concern for safety, and I appreciate you've noted that, and that'll be a reserved matter. So thank you.
Councillor Lamy?
Thank you. This is quite a difficult one because I am concerned with the exiting of the traffic from this particular site in a forward motion, because it appears that there is some difficulty with lines of sight, particularly if you're reversing out. So therefore, I want to make sure that we actually conform to our policies and make sure that every traffic must exit in forward motion.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's no more debate, so we're going to add a condition for a construction management plan. And will that be a standard one, or?
It is standard.
Okay, and will that include a recommendation or a requirement that all the construction traffic should leave in a forward gear?
The condition doesn't, but then the details that come in, we would look for all those things as relevant to the site specifics of that area.
Lovely. So subject to that extra condition requiring a construction management plan, this application has been recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of the officer recommendation, please? I think that's 8, Matthew. And those against? 1. Thank you very much. So that is approved. So we just have a short break whilst we change the presenting officer. So we're obviously doing very well on time, and the officer is going to be another 5 minutes. So you've got a 5-minute break, members. Members, could you just take your seats, please? Okay. We're starting again, please. Where's Councillor Cunningham? Oh. Well, it's been more than 5. Thank you, members. Okay, Matthew? Yeah. So we now move to item number 9 on our agendas, which is the change of use from agricultural to equestrian, a proposed barn with stables, tackroom, feed and hay store and outdoor menage. And this is on land at Mill Lane in Swanmore. And our presenting officer is Drew Blackman. Welcome, Andrew.
Sorry, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me now. First committee, so do bear with me if I get some of the technological problems there. This application is a resubmission, effectively, of a previously withdrawn scheme, which was in a different location. If you can go to the next slide, please. The site is just off of Mill Lane, and the previously withdrawn scheme was over on the western side of the site, where you can see those 6 larger trees. There was the stable, manege and parking area. Now, if you please go on to the next slide. The current application is the red line area. So if you can see on the northern part of the left-hand plan, that is where the current application will be cited. And then if you go on to the next slide, please. That's the previously withdrawn scheme, which in discussion with the applicant and the agent, we felt that would be too prominent. It's the highest point of the site. So this current application has been relocated. And then if you go back to the one prior, sorry, the previous, thank you very much. The building now is to be located much closer to Mill Lane in a more characteristic pattern of the other developments that we have in the area. On top of the relocation, the barn itself is 4 meters smaller. The parking area is significantly smaller, and it's been engineered down by approximately 1 meter into the ground. If you could go on 2 slides, please. On top of the location and the being engineered down into the ground, we've got bolstered landscaping. Now, there's an existing hedgerow along Mill Lane, and the applicant is going to, and we're going to control it by condition. We're totally within our rights to do that. The applicant has offered to improve the existing hedgerow, and then to, on top of that, introduce a line of trees where you can see the 6 large green circles. That will be a mix of hornbeam and I think elder trees. Then in addition to that, there is running perpendicular from the road where you can see the green line underneath those 6 circles and then turning what looks like south, but that would be a new hedgerow. All of that is proposed to improve upon the existing screening to the site effectively. You please go on one more slide. As you can see from the barn itself, it's for 8 horses. And we are proposing to control that by condition, so limiting it to 8 only, for private use only, not for commercial purposes. We have a condition on that as well. And there's a hay store and a tack room, and we've added a further condition to prevent that from being for extra stabling, if you want to call it that, so they can't exceed 8 in number. Please go on one more slide. The engineering down will address the levels, as you can see on that plan, and will help minimise and soften it within the wider landscape. Then if you cycle on one more, please. This is the view from within the site of the existing mobile field shelters that are there. That is over towards where the previously withdrawn scheme is. And then if you, one more please, thank you. That's viewing south to Bear Farm. And then if you go, next photo please, next slide. That's towards Mill Lane, and another one. And then that's looking almost due east towards Mill Lane from what would be the access track internally to the site. There is an easement with Portsmouth Water that goes through the site. And I need to verbally update that we've had amended plans been provided to Portsmouth directly from the applicant, and they have confirmed to us that Portsmouth are happy with that. So we have an access track which basically runs over where the easement is, and a turning circle that's required for larger vehicles turning within the site. We have a condition that will maintain that to be kept, which will almost double up with this separate legislation requiring access to the easement. And then if you go one more slide, please. Well, that's the conclusion of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to the public speaking. We have first of all 2 objectors, Mr. Ward and Mr. Chaplin. If you'd like to come forward, please. You will share the 3 minutes between you. Have you agreed how you're going to share the 3 minutes?
Yes, Chair, we have.
Lovely. Okay, well, when you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name's John Chaplin. I live in Surbiton Mill Cottage, which is approximately 50 metres from this proposed site. It's actually not the 100 metres that is stated in the report, which makes us wonder if the planning officers have actually visited the site. Richard Ward and myself will be speaking today, including on behalf of other neighbours who are unable to be here. I wanted to speak because, having read the planning report, I believe it's very one-sided. The entire community who are directly affected by the proposed development have raised objections, and there's not a single supporter in the immediate area. We feel that the original objection points that were raised have not been addressed, and this shows a complete disregard for the local community. Due to limited time, I can only give one example of the objection points that have been ignored. There is a large oak tree near the existing entrance that is at risk and has been excluded from the application form and the drawings. If this had been declared, a tree survey would have been necessary to identify any trees that might be affected by the groundworks. If trees adjacent to the Meon Valley Trail are damaged and die, the whole development will be even more visible to the trail users. The report is also contradictory. In the consultation section, Portsmouth Water have been reported as raising no objection, and in the informative section it appears that they have not been consulted and there may be a significant problem requiring water diversion works. One of the key objectives of the South Downs National Park is to foster the economic and social well-being of the local community. We believe that the report disregards the community in favour of the applicant and their agent. And they're not local to the area, they will not be impacted by the traffic, the noise, the smell and the unsightly views. In the circumstances, I would ask you to refuse the development.
Thank you, Chair. I currently reside at Bear Farm Barn, which has been left out of all the pictures on that were showed earlier. It's a listed building, and it's approximately about 100 metres from where this new development is proposed to take place. It's a very quiet area. You know, we don't have any traffic. In fact, the only traffic we get along Mill Lane is predominantly on foot. You know, people using Mill Lane to go onto the Meon Valley track. To cut a long story short, this facility is too large to be of personal use. The excuse given is that the person's daughter is a current GB rider. That is not the case. She left the GB team when she was 16 and hasn't done anything to do with the GB squad ever since. In fact, if you Google her name, a ride in school comes up attached to her name, which is called Skylar. That's spelled SKYLLA, if you want to have a look at it yourself, where she basically costs out her time for instruction and breeding of horses and all of that stuff. And that is what this development is going to be about.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking to the 3 minutes. Members, do we have questions of clarification for our objectors? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. If I heard correctly, and it's possible I didn't, you were referring to an oak tree close to the road. I can't locate that on the plans and photographs that we've got. I wonder if you could explain a bit more.
Yeah, certainly. So that's my point, is that there was a lot of errors in the application form that excluded things for whatever convenient reason. And this particular oak tree is a really big oak tree, and it's right next to where the entrance to the field has been created. So at the moment, the horse boxes that go in there, because it's already in use, by the way, the horse boxes go in there, drive over the roots, and they've just got no regard for it before at all. And they're saying also they want to make the entrance much bigger, and I think that they're just going to have to lose the tree. And my point is that you shouldn't be allowed to do that kind of thing without being accurate in your application. And if you have to do a tree survey, you have to do, that's the process, but don't just disregard it like they have with everything else they've been doing.
Councillor Reid.
Chairman, based on the oak tree that's just been explained, I've got the photograph up, the aerial photograph, and I must admit I'm finding it difficult to actually see which tree this is. Is it possible that we could put that photograph up and maybe the gentleman can point out exactly which tree it is?
Have we got an aerial photograph? Yes. We can't get any closer, can we? So, can you describe exactly
Yeah,
what
I'm
it
happy
is?
to comment. So this must be an old, a very old photograph, because what's happened is that where they enter the field, which is kind of opposite that barn that's on the other side of the road, they've put a load of gravel and hardcore down, and they're driving in through there. And so either the photo's been airbrushed in some way, or it's a very old photograph. I don't quite understand why the tree's not there, but I can assure you it is. I've driven past it for 25 years, so it's quite an old friend of mine.
So that was taken 3 days ago.
Well, we'll raise it with the officer in due course. Thank you very much. Any other questions for our objectors, members? No? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Sorry, I was busy on Google Street View looking at this tree. It was just in regards to your comments around the commercial use, the breeding use, and the training use. The officers put in a condition 2, which conditions the use only to be private and excludes commercial breeding and training use. Would that condition sort of satisfy you as or reassure you that it would be for private use, so that in the future, if that did change, it could be sort of then brought up with enforcement?
Yeah, no, it doesn't actually. In short answer to your question, I have read that condition that was imposed. The issue is that there's who is responsible for the follow-up of making sure that that's not happening, right? That the area currently is being used to train people in horse riding. So that's currently going on at this moment in time in that field. I live 100 meters from it. I get the cars going past me every day. I know I walk my dog past there all the time. I can see what's going on. On top of that, there is a mention in the planning about the current fencing and stuff that's there. that actually hasn't got an application for it already. So they've sectioned the land up themselves and put fencing there, and the two movable stable field shelters, which are huge, by the way, which are massive, which will both take 2 horses in those things. So there's another 4 horses that could be placed on that land. You know, you only have to do the background work to understand that in my opinion, they are trying to hoodwink the planning committee, right? With that statement constantly in there of the GB, the daughters is a GB rider, and hence why she needs 8 stables. Myself and my partner, we have horses. We've had horses for a long period of time. They're not stabled close to us. They're stabled elsewhere, and we know what it's like to run and look after horses. This is to all intents and purposes a commercial setup.
Councillor Laning.
Since you're fully aware of the requirements for grazing and that, is there sufficient land there for 8 horses to graze?
Yes, there is. They are currently letting they're currently letting out parcels of land on that site for people to keep their horses in. So they're doing it at present, and no one's visiting them and telling them that they can't do it. So you must excuse me for calling into question the conditions that you're placing down, because they're currently using that. They're currently doing it, and no one's stopping them. So there is, you know, I believe the area itself, the parcel of land total is 20 acres, maybe 19 acres, something like that, maybe even a little bit more. So it's normally about 2 acres per horse. That that's the sort of rough thing, because you need to move the horses around. You know, it was £300,000 for them to purchase that piece of land, and looking at the plans there, it's at least another £250,000 investment into that. It's £500,000 of investment. They don't live in the area. They don't live, you know, they live in Hamble, which is approximately half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour drive away. It's a very large scale investment into that area for what? For private use. There must be some payback for their investment.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can I just ask, how many horses are on the site at the moment? And can you just say something about noise and light in terms of activity? Thank you.
Yeah, so there are approximately 6 to 8 horses on there at the moment. You can't actually see right the way down to the bottom of the field from the road, and of course I won't go on someone else's private land. Okay, so what I see is from the gate and from my own property. So there's about 6 to 8 horses at any given time on there. There's horse boxes coming down, dropping off horses, picking them up on a regular basis. So there's some sort of movement of horses going on there as well. As for the noise and light, because there's no facilities there at the moment, you know, it's very much a daytime operation. You know, they're going down there during the day, doing what they've got to do with their horses and coming away. You know, a development like this has a lot of place for scope creep. Okay, and I think you all know what I mean by that. You know, the application at the moment for personal use, the next thing will be, you know, we've got 8 horses on site. We need to think of the welfare of the horses. So we need some accommodation on there, and it'll grow and grow and grow to the point where we've got lights up, we've got all of that sort of stuff taking place. And you know, it's in a very sensitive area. You know, I moved to the area 2 years ago. I was forces for 24 years, HM forces. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, and it's a fantastic area. You know, it's quiet. There is no problem at all with that. Our local community is bound together by looking after it, and that's why we feel so strongly about this.
And if I may, Jay, just follow up on that. So there's a facility not far from the Blanchard's Wells, which obviously has increasing traffic on the road where Mill Lane comes off. And I wonder if you could just comment on that.
Well, interestingly as well, Mill Lane that you see on the picture there is actually a dead end. It's a no-through road, which has been omitted there from the. So the only traffic that can come into that site is directly using the narrowest part of Mill Lane. We've had several problems over the years with people blocking our driveway, because when the place was a farm and and the barn was disused, people used to just park there, so they felt as though they could still park there when it's housed, and the people who owned that field were parking there as well, by the way. So we've had issues with that we've had to put some wooden blocks out to stop. It's not a passing place. So from Heath Road to where the development is approximately 400 meters. There is no passing place on that, and it's a very, very narrow road to get anything down. In fact, the horse boxes regularly destroy the culvert that runs down the side of there, and that's being run over by the horse boxes at present. So to get the building material in there with all the hardcore that needs to go down for the menage and all of that, that's going to be a significant destruction of Mill Lane.
Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. You may return to your seats now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lee?
If I may, sorry.
One more.
I just want to pick your thoughts on the management of manure. I mean, obviously 8 horses is quite significant. Can I just ask for your views on what you think that means and how well that will be done, given the locality to sensitive receptors? Thank you.
Yes, so I live the closest to the site, and behind there is the Meon Valley Trail, and I walk, because I've got a dog, I walk there 2 or 3 times a day, and we've seen behind the field shelters, which was actually hidden again from the photographs, there's an 8-foot high mountain of manure which has been growing, and it absolutely stinks already, and it's only only March. So,
Okay, well, that is covered by the conditions, so we'll talk about that with the officer. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Right, we now have the parish council representative, who is not Brendan Gibbs, but John Hyland, I believe. So welcome, John. And you will have 3 minutes when you start speaking.
I'm turned on. Thank you. And thank you for your time this morning. Okay, my name's John Hyland. I'm a landscape architect and a fellow of the Landscape Institute. I'm also chair of Soberton Parish Council. You will also need to be aware that I'm a member of the National Park Authority, and I sit on the authority's planning committee as deputy chairman. So, Soberton Parish Council objects to the change of use of this site as a matter of loss of tranquility and the fact that there will be an awful lot of noise and the intensity of use which will affect the Meon Valley Trail. It is the Meon Valley Trail that we're concerned about. The Meon Valley Trail is a major route into National Park from the south to the north. It connects long distance footpaths such as the Wayfarers Walk and the South Downs Way, which starts off here. So this is a very important route when it comes into the National Park. What I think is important that when you move, or if you like, walk up from Wickham, which is where the National Park starts, you come up through Beer Forest, past the sawmill, and then you're at the pumping station, which is the one conservation area that Soberton has. The pumping station's silent. It's a Victorian pumping station. There is an auction house on the front of it, but it's essentially a silent use. Now, at the point of the pumping station, the river is adjacent to the Meon Valley Trail, so therefore the A32 runs to the west of that. This makes this part of the route, where my friends here live, much quieter. And what concerns us is that the intensification of use on this site, because of the possible change of use, will actually destroy that silence. I mean, you know what it's like if you sit in your garden on a Sunday morning and you hear your neighbours. You can't see them, but you can hear them. And that's the concern. Now, there are landscape impacts in terms of visual impacts. I'm not going to go into those, so I'm not sure they're fundamental. But what is fundamental is noise and disturbance, and that's what you should be considering. So I'd like to conclude here. I'm not going to get down to the long grass of the detail of this application. I'd like to conclude and say the first purpose of the duty of the National Park is to conserve and enhance. This application doesn't do that. I mean, I can go through the rest of the purposes, but I could just give you a seminar, so I'm not going to do that. But I think it's your duty to
protect the integrity of the park by turning this application down. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the Parish Council? Councillor Reid.
Just to make it very clear, the Meon Valley Trail follows the original railway line, does it not?
Correct, it does.
So that is literally right alongside the proposed area.
It's got a common boundary with the proposed site, and it's the entire length of the proposed site. Thank you.
So no further questions. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Thank you. And it does indeed make a difference that this is a South Downs National Park application. Right. Drew, do you have any further comments following the public contributions? Thank you.
Well, firstly, thank you for all your contributions. If I can go through them in order as I've noted, there was query of the large oak tree on the access point, and if we can get some of the slides up, we can go to the aerial photograph, because you can see it on street view, and when we're in the aerial photograph, which will come up in a sec. If you zoom in as much as you can, right in the middle of Mill Lane, where you see the grey line for the road, and you've got the building to the north of your properties, immediately opposite that, almost underneath that grey line area, is a tree. So it's partly obscured by the Mill Lane, the grey line off the road. I'm talking about the building with what look like the 6 roof lights in the north of the plan. If we can all agree that we're looking at the right location, I think that's quite important. Opposite that is an oak tree, which is close to the existing access, and in planning terms, that existing access can be used, and the current application doesn't propose to change that or to widen it. If they were looking to widen it, we might need to understand the impact on the tree, on the root network in the ground. So the current situation is they're applying to use that existing access, and the oak tree is still there, and it's, as far as I can see, it's still proposed to be kept. So we don't have that as an issue that we would be sort of looking into any further. But I understand what you're saying. It's there, needs to be looked at, needs to be considered. And then there was comment on the existing fencing that currently there isn't a planning permission for the site. So this application today gives us the opportunity to exert some control over future fencing within the site. And that's why the landscape officer has recommended a condition that prohibits ticker tape, fencing and sectioning off, which is of course less desirable from a landscape point of view, and for us to formalise any sectioning off, which we do have within the plans where they've got bar fencing, so pretty standard timber fencing within the site, and anything other than that would be prohibited by our condition. There was a query over letting parcels of the land as well. If that's this application where we have our red line, we have control over that for the purposes of this application we have before us. If there is any other issues outside of that where it's proposed or currently being let out, etc., that's something we can look at with enforcement as to whether we have any control over that and whether we'd need to entertain an application or to take that the next stage further. So thank you for raising those points. That is very useful. The Meon Valley Trail, if you can see on this aerial photograph here, you can see what looks like a run of trees, and you can imagine that's where the old railway used to be. So that's the principal route which has been raised by members of the public and members today. That is heavily wooded, and it's a very nice trail, and the importance of views to and from it are obviously important for this application. What I would say is that the building that is currently proposed, it would be hard to get views of that from that trail. They'll be predominantly obscured by the existing vegetation of that trail in its own right, in much in the same way as you probably can't see the other properties along Mill Lane when you're going up and down the trail. The listed building that I believe one of our members of the public was his property is effectively in the middle of the plan. Is it the left-hand side of the two, as I can see? The right, closer to the right, yeah. Yeah, so from Mill Lane on your left-hand side, it's the first one as you go in. And in terms of, sorry? Conservatory. We need to zoom out. And so the conservation area boundary, just being pointed out, that's in terms of our heritage assets, they're the 2 points that we obviously need to consider in the round. Those 2 points. So when we've looked at the application, the heritage point and it was just pointed out being the conservation area and your listed building, we consider whether it would have whether it would conserve, enhance, protect that. So would this harm your property? Well, it's the considered view of the local authority that a building of that size, landscaped in this manner, wouldn't cause harm to your listed building. We understand it has an impact, and that's where we have moved the location of it from a more prominent part of the site, and we've engineered it down in terms of what we're trying to negotiate with the applicant and improve the landscaping around it to soften it as much as possible to make it consistent with other buildings in the area. Not to say it doesn't have an effect, of course. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. So we now go to questions on the whole report with our officer. So I'll accept questions, members. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. The Parish Council representative mentioned about noise. I was just wondering if there was sort of a noise impact assessment from, a general equestrian centre. And I know you mentioned about the pumping station sort of not causing any noise. I was just wondering whether that included the timber yard that was next to it, just to try and get a perspective of noise in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. Pumping station, sorry.
It's to the northwest of the site.
Northwest of the site. Okay, so that's a separate. It might be useful if we keep the aerials photograph up. Yeah. Sorry, could you clarify your question in relation to the noise from that pump?
Sorry, it wasn't. It was more the fact. So it was more the background noise of the site and how an equestrian centre in that location would add to any noise.
Okay.
So the Parish Council representative, obviously, there's no noise from the pumping station, and there may be some from the timber yard next to it to the southwest. But it was just more an overview of the background noise and how this application would add to sort of that background noise of the general area.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Well, I think suffice to say we've got two conditions that relate to that sort of activity. One precludes music taking place, so and another one prohibiting floodlighting, and that doesn't relate to noise, but the use of the site for private use, which I know has been a point that we've discussed, and we can discuss that further. The nature of this activity, if for private use for one individual, we need to consider that with what's the fallback position? What can they currently do within this site, being agricultural lands, different sorts of noises, different timings, etc. Fairly similar in the fact that you would observe such noises if you were next to a farm, whether that's arable or other, or if you have animals being brought in and out, etc. That's fairly consistent with a private stabling facility. And on top of that, we put the condition on recommending that no music and no floodlighting, etc., private use, not commercial. So our view as a local authority would be that there would be a very consistent level of noise with that, and there wouldn't be essentially a harm that you could identify or demonstrate, if that answers that question.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. So, given the existing use and the history of this site, how confident can we be that the condition over no commercial use, but personal private use of these stables will be adhered to?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's come out of other points that have been raised today. I have to obviously give the usual line that we can only judge this application on its merits. So I'm confident that we can put a condition on prohibiting any other activities. Speaking to potential future changes, etc., this is the same as any other site in any other part of the country. Sometimes people may change their minds, and they may well want to apply to either vary that condition, or they may apply to change the nature of the site, and that is the opportunity to consider that. But I would want to add in discussion with the applicant or the applicant's agent, I have asked them, is it for private use only? And I said, because if you do want to use it for commercial, if you want to use it as a riding school, if you want to do lessons out of it, I said, include it within this application and we can consider it. So we as the authority, we're open to them being open and honest and applying for something. And they confirm they do not want to do that. I understand, and what I'm gathering is that that's different to what you're seeing on the ground. What I would say is that currently we don't have a planning permission that controls that effectively. And this is an opportunity for us to put a very clear black and white control on the nature of this exercise arena and stables, and anything contrary to that we have control over. But that's a long answer for basically how confident are we? We're confident in our controls, but we can't speak to how people may change their mind.
And can I ask about the access as well? So we've heard that there's at least 400 meters of a narrow lane with no passing places. Are we confident that and there's a history of damage already caused to the lane? Are we confident that access is acceptable?
Highway Authority are happy, and that means that we then consider what, again, a little bit like the nature of the noise, what's the fallback position there? What can they currently do? What vehicles can currently use that lane and access those fields? And the size of the horse boxes, trailers, etc. And even to the construction traffic, which you can vary the size of those loads, but arguably they're going to be similar sorts of sizes as you would have for or normal agricultural traffic that could use the site.
Members, Councillor Laming.
Thank you. I've got several questions on this. I am slightly perplexed on what they intend to do with this site. If they're competition horses or if they're stud horses, they're going to be very expensive animals. So therefore, security is going to be at its height. Now, that could involve all sorts of lighting and other noisy, intrusive measures. The second point is the dung heap. Are we conditioning how often that is removed? Because 8 horses produce quite a lot of dung. And where it's being situated, as I understand it, next to the Meehan Way, is a very important point. The third thing is that with the stables, they're going to have water on there, and they're going to have an awful lot of pee from the horses to take into consideration. So are we looking at the nitrate levels on this as well?
Thank you for those questions. Firstly, on lighting, you raised a question about expensive horses and the need for security, etc. Our lighting condition requires that any other external lighting needs to be approved in writing. So we're saying you can't have flood lighting, but any other lighting you need to apply to the local planning authority, us, the details as to what that would be. So I would anticipate if they want motion sensor related security lighting, which could address such a thing, you'd have that together with CCTV cameras, etc. They would need to apply to us. So we would have the ability to get details of what type of cameras, what type of sensor, what timing, what maybe even what level of lighting as well. So we could, well, we do have control over that, but if they do want to have those, then we could cover that issue off. Secondly, on waste, yeah, you mentioned that there are currently areas of the site which are being backed up with waste. We've got a condition that requires a waste management plan. So any waste associated with this, we would have in agreement that it needs to be stored here and removed on with a certain frequency, and any other areas that would be able to be accommodate that waste storage would be clearly marked on a plan, rather than just being left banked up at the side of the site, where we don't currently have that control. Nitrate, if you mean sort of leachate coming from the waste, etc., it's going to be fairly comparable if you had either silage on that site or any other agricultural activity. You're going to have a lot of runoff, and again, similarly, don't have control over that for the existing fallback position, but for this application we do. We've got surface water runoff conditions that will help control and allocate where that's going to go and how that's dealt with. Thank you.
And finally,
oh, sorry,
on transport, horse boxes. If these are competition horses, these are going to have very large transporters, because you'll be taking 4 or 6 horses at a time. There won't be a 2-horse box. It'll be a large vehicle, size of a removal van. So I'm a bit worried about the transport side of it going down that very narrow lane and how it can turn and park.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've discussed with the applicant's agent, and they've told me that they're going to use the smaller ones that carry, say, 2 at a time, and any other larger vehicles would need to work within their turning circle area they've allocated on one of their plans, our site plan. So any vehicle that would go into the site, we have an area that we can control that they can turn and then leave the site in a forward gear. That's that standard way of saying not reversing out, because that wouldn't be appropriate for milling.
Yeah, because I'm also concerned with the size of the hay and straw vehicles going in there as well, because they'll consume quite a lot over the winter.
Okay, so it needs to be appropriately sized vehicles. Yeah.
More questions, members, on the report? Councillor Edwards.
I'd like to come back to this oak tree. I don't present this as evidence for the committee, but I took a look at the Apple map site, for example, which does show the tree, I think, more clearly than the aerial map we have in front of us. Is there any way in which this committee, by terms of a condition, could suggest a TPO for that tree?
I'm sure we know that the purpose of a TPO is to preserve trees of particular merit, which, not to say this one isn't, that we can look at that, of course. For this application, we've got an existing access, we have an existing tree which is a distance from that access point, and as far as I can tell reading the plans, the fan for the access, it looks like it will not be near to a point where I would need it to be considered to look at that tree. Is the concern that you'd want to see it retained, or, you know, preferably? Is that?
My concern is that we should look, appropriate people, skilled people should look carefully at this and see whether there's anything worthy of protection in view of the potential development.
Perhaps with the slides, if we could go to one of the site plans. if you, sorry, if you start probably about the second or third slide in, if you keep going. That, yep. Go down two, please. Yeah, next one. Perfect, thank you. We could perhaps have it include, we could maybe ask for an amending plan to show the
You have to grow.
That's perfect, thank you, thank you. It might help then if we have that tree indicated on our site plan, and then that can form part, because we have a landscape plan for all the new additional planting, the works to be done to the hedgerow, etc., to improve that. So we could easily ask the applicant to include that tree on that plan. I think that might address that area, that question, sorry. That would be helpful. Yeah.
Site.
And would that include a root protection area, for instance?
Yes, because we would ask for it to be shown in accordance with the British standard of it being protected.
Councillor Reid.
Chairman, page 119, the penultimate paragraph, it refers to corrugated roof lights. Now, corrugated roof lights, I don't think, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, you can shield them. So if there's light inside that structure, there's nothing to stop the escape of light in the national park, which has a dark skies policy. So I think that's something we ought to be aware about.
Condition 14 looks at the details of a sensitive lighting strategy. That is more in respect of biodiversity, but I think through the biodiversity requirements, we are looking to mitigate lighting at night time. So it is something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend a separate condition. I appreciate your point that the usual dark night skies condition would just block completely that, and obviously that's not the design of this, but I think that's probably as much as we can look at possibly through that and seeing how it coordinates to minimise it for the bats and for the dark night skies.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Reid?
I understand what's been said.
Right, members, any more questions for our officer before we go into debate? No? So debate. Councillor Reid. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the officer for a very thorough report. I think he's done a really good job on that. However, there are a large number of questions hanging over this application. I think that it asks too many questions of us. If it is for competition horses, we're looking at a lot of money per animal, which is going to involve a lot of security, and most of these types of places live on people to look after them, because these horses are valuable. If it's going to be used for stud, the same applies. And I am very concerned with the way that it's come to us on this, and I think that on this I cannot go along with the recommendation for various reasons.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on what Councillor Reeve said. I'm completely conflicted by this uncertainty about personal, private and commercial use. I think we heard a concern about what called mission creep or scope creep, because, you know, that's just human nature. So that's, for me, is a real concern. I appreciate, and the officer explained very well, thank you. The revised location is obviously better in terms of landscape. Harm to the neighbourhood amenity and the issue of conservation impact, I'm still not convinced that what we have in front of us is sufficient to quell my concerns. The conditions, as we've discussed, yes, we've improved them, which is great. Yeah, we've got manure management plans, and there's talk about conservation-based land management approaches as part of equestrian developments in the countryside. I get all that, but I'm not convinced that the outcome will be less harmful, particularly in terms of neighbourhood amenity, the transport issues in an area which is demonstrably countryside. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
One thing that struck me is that at this point, the Meon Valley footpath along the railway line is at the bottom of a cutting. So I don't think there's going to be a very much intrusive effect onto people passing up and down it from this development. But I think we've all expressed concern over this slightly thin end of the wedge syndrome, which we do find quite a lot with horsey developments. And I would be very concerned about this. But of course, we have to be judging it against the fact that it's agricultural land. And agriculture in itself is quite disturbing, with machinery, movements, stuff being delivered, stuff being taken away, and so on. It's a very difficult one to make one's mind up about. I don't know whether we can build in sufficient safeguards to allow it.
Councillor Williams.
Oh, there we go. Yes, no, thank you, Chair. I too take on board the comments that have been made from the members of the public and the parish council. I am reassured in that we have to obviously view the application as it is. So those comments around, you know, the increasing scope, I do understand and do take them on board, but we do have to look at the application as is, with the conditions that are proposed. So I am confident from those conditions that as the application as is, it wouldn't have an adverse impact from its current use of agricultural land moving to equestrian. The other concerns from regards to noise have been obviously reassured from the officer, as well as the screening from the Meon Valley Trail in regards to the woodlands there. But on balance, the application as is, I think, going from its current use to its proposed use, wouldn't have an adverse impact with the conditions proposed to ensure that this is a private use and non-commercial, non-breeding, etc.
to invite me to comment, Chair. And I find myself very conflicted on this. I mean, I accept, of course, if a private individual applies for permission to build a house, it might be for 2 bedrooms or 10 bedrooms, and that's their choice. And in a sense, that is what we have to take into account here. If somebody says they need a facility for private riding, personal riding of this scale, then that's their choice. It's their money and their land. But we have a duty to ensure that equestrian developments have a positive impact and protect the natural beauty. The conditions under which a large equestrian development might win my favour more easily, actually in the national park, if it were commercial, because we would then be looking at employment in the countryside and sustainability of the local economy and so on. That may or may not follow from this application, but I can't see any evidence of employment or other matters. So it seems, on balance, I think difficult for me to reconcile this scale of development with what we have seen. I'm still turning over the conditions in my mind, and I'm not going to announce which way I'm going to vote. I hope we can have maybe a little bit more debate, because I think this is a really, really difficult one.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. It is a difficult one, and that's why it's come to committee and we have to make a decision. I am very conflicted as well about this, because whilst giving this planning permission would give us an element of control, so, you know, we have strict, strong conditions. The planning officer, as has been said, produced a very good report, has negotiated well. I think that what is proposed would not be visible from the trail. The possibility that in due course this could be then they could turn around and apply for future use as a commercial site would fill me with horror, because it is not in the right place for that sort of use. But if it was already there and built and being used already, it would be very difficult to turn that application down, despite the fact that it's, you know, much too narrow a lane, much too intrusive on this area of the countryside. I do instinctively think that it is over industrialization almost of the countryside, because a manege inevitably is this huge area of hard standing effectively. It's a very large stable block. It's a very large barn area. It's 8 horses minimum and then more mobile field shelters. But we do have to weigh up this possible new approved provision against what is already happening there. And, you know, that is uncontrolled, and we don't have conditions over what's happening in the rest of the field at the moment. And is one going to be much worse than the other? Are we going to be having an enforcement issue against existing use? I don't know. I don't know whether we could. So it's a very difficult. I do think that's the landscape-led vision of the South Downs National Park is, even with all this extra landscaping and the planting of the trees and the new hedges and the building in and so on, whilst it makes the best of what is going to be a very large development, nevertheless will have a huge impact on this area and on the near residents. And whether that is sufficient for us to turn it down in planning terms, I am not sure. I do think that there will be a loss of tranquility in this area, and I am concerned that that the increase in, even obviously there'll be a significant disruption in terms of tranquility whilst it's being built, but even afterwards, inevitably, I think there's going to be noise and disturbance. There's going to be a lot of waste having to be taken off the site, a lot of horses and feed and everything coming onto the site. And it's a no-through road, so normally it's very quiet. So I am very conflicted. My instinct is to say this is a step too far. This is too big. It's not in the right place. The access is difficult. And the impact on the Southlands National Park is unacceptable. And I think that is the way I'm going to go. But if anybody hasn't yet spoken and would like to, Councillor Cunningham, I'd be delighted to hear your views.
Thank you, Chair. In my view, I think it's an introduction of inappropriate traffic. I think its impact on the landscape and the amenity of those using the Meow Valley Trail is unacceptable. And I'm going to vote against the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Small, I think you're the last one who hasn't yet contributed to debate.
I'm quite pleased to hear everybody else say how conflicted, because again, that was my natural instinct. I think I agree with the comments you just made, Jane. I think it's too much for that area and it does significant harm. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
I think we're going to move to a vote unless anybody wants to make a further contribution, which I will on this occasion accept. No? Okay. So members, this application is recommended for permission. So can I see those in favour of the officer recommendation, please? And those against? Okay, so that is not approved. So we now have to agree the reasons for refusal.
Yes. I'm just thinking, Chair. Yes, the most, I think, robust arguments that you put forward for this is certainly with it being contrary to policies in the local plan SD4, which is about landscape character and also equestrian development, SD7 relative tranquility, SD8 dark night skies, and then you've got SD4 24 equestrian uses in respect to the size being for disproportionate for private use. Some wording around that what we might look at in its location on the size of the site that there is, which is affecting those interests of those policies. I think that's the specific reasons and the wording I would ask to be delegated back to us so we can look at all those policy areas in their precise wording. But that is something that is robust. Like you say, in terms of it's not a commercial use, the freedoms of a person to, you know, their in private endeavours is not something that we can look at to refuse it on. But I can see that the impact in that local area of the scale of a premises this side is harmful in your members' views to those policies.
Thank you. So with those general reasons for refusal and specifics to be agreed in due course between myself and the officers, can I see all those in favour of refusing this application, please? And those against? And abstentions? One abstention. So that application is refused. Thank you very much. We now take a lunch